there are some traditions out there that the elder generation needs to keep alive. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. I feel like in the world these days, people have become so serious about everything. Everything's so serious. Oh, your opinion on this is the most important thing in the world. Or what you think about this, or what you think about that. Everybody's opinion is so serious these days. Get over yourself. Honestly, things really aren't that serious all the time. I've noticed that I just remember back in the 90s and the 80s, people were much more concerned about what was going on in their communities and what was going on in their households and what was going on in their own countries, what was going on in their own cities, what was going on in their own societies. And what I find is happening now is people don't seem to care about what's happening in their own societies. They seem to care way more about what's happening in countries that are 3,000, 5,000 miles away that share none of their values. Things aren't that serious. So when you sit down with your friend and you have a conversation, understand that your opinion on things may not matter to that person. And that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because here's the thing. The generation I come from, which is I'm an elder millennial, but also the older generations. So when I think about them, I'm thinking about Gen X and I'm thinking about the boomers, the silent generation even. One tradition I think that all of those generations have in common is the fact that they don't care about certain things. I don't care what your opinion is. So if you come over to me and you say to me, hey Matt, or if I'm talking about something to a friend and you have nothing to do with the conversation, and you come over and you're like, well, you want to hear my opinion on it? And I say, no, I don't. Then don't get offended. I just don't want to hear your opinion. If I wanted your opinion, and this is something that I used to hear all the time when I was growing up. If I wanted your opinion, I would ask for your opinion. So I do think we need to get back to, if I want your opinion, I'll ask for your opinion. And that's that. Because at the end of the day, the majority of things that we do in life or that actually matter in life, there's not really a debate on them. We all need to keep a roof over our heads. We all want safety for our families. We want food in our bellies. We want water. We want shelter, right? We want to have a peaceful place and world that we live in our society. So you'll find that you have a lot more in common with people than you don't. And the old adage of not caring, I think not caring is one of the most underrated values that you can have. Now, when I say don't care, I don't mean that you have like a general apathy. I'm not saying you're apathetic about everything, but there's just some things you just don't need to care about. You don't need to care about every little thing that's happening in the world. Because nowadays we're so connected via the internet, via social media, via Twitter, that we can see news everywhere, all the time, anytime, and we can see it through our smartphones that make us dumber. We never had the ability to see news across the world so easily. When you compare the elder generations, I almost call them like a super generation, because when you look at the elder millennials, Gen X, boomers, silent generation, these generations typically have a lot in common. They know what it's like to figure out how to do something. You know, there's a tradition in figuring it out. So, for example, when I was growing up, if something happened, and I wouldn't just run to my father or to my mother saying, this is what happened to me, because you know what they would say to me? Figure it out. Go figure it out. And I think that the generations that are the elder generations know the concept of figure it out, know the concept of trying to find a way, trying to find a solution, being problem solvers. And I do think that that's a tradition that has been slipping away, whereas what you see with these newer generations, not all obviously, but what you're seeing and what people want nowadays is they always want somebody else to figure out their problems. They never want to figure out their problems on their own. So if somebody does something to them, let's say somebody attacks them, their first instinct is to call the police versus defend themselves. Or if something's not going right in their society, they're like, well, the government needs to do something about it. The government needs to fix this issue. The government needs to do this. The government needs to do that. And where I come from, back in the days, and I keep on saying back in the days, it was never about getting somebody else to fix it for you. You typically went and figured out how to fix it yourself, or you worked with a group of people within your community to address issues. You weren't waiting for somebody to do it for you. And what's happening now is, and what the kids are being taught in school now is, especially if you're being bullied, for example. If you're being bullied, tell a teacher. What does that teach a kid? If something's not going your way, just go tell somebody. Don't do anything about it. Give your authority to somebody else. It seems like that's what kids are being taught nowadays is, if something's happening, tell somebody else about it. Don't do anything about it yourself, and give your power away. Because you don't have the power or authority, you don't have the ability to take care of it yourself. I just think that that's a bad way to look at the world. Some other traditions that I really think the elder generations need to keep, well, for me, when I think about a tradition that I love in my family, is every year I go fishing with my dad. And typically I go with my uncle, or I would go with my dad's friend, Brian, R.I.P., rest in peace, Brian. We would go fishing together, and I would learn how to fish. I would learn when I get on the boat. I would learn how to load a boat, how to unload a boat. I would learn how to catch a fish. I would learn how to find out the fishing spots. What am I looking for to be able to catch fish? When I catch a fish, how do I put a hook on a fishing rod, right? How do I catch a fish? How do I take a fish off a hook? You know, how do I fillet a fish, right? Stuff like that. And you learn these skills from the elder generation. I learned so much from my dad and from my uncle and from Brian and from other fishermen that I've been with. It's an amazing tradition in the family that I will keep alive forever. I will always go fishing. And I remember I went fishing with my grandfather and I believe my great-grandfather when I was 5 years old. So this would have been like 86 or something like that. And they had been fishing at the same lake for, well, my great-grandfather Cecil, my grandpa Leonard, they'd been fishing at the same lake, which was called the Shambo in Saskatchewan, which is a huge lake where you catch big pike and walleye. But my grandfather, I remember, by the time he passed away, I went on his last fishing trip. He had went fishing for 55 years in a row at that same lake, at the Shambo. So I find it, I think that these traditions of getting out in nature and the other traditions you might have as a person is, especially in Canada, we have a tradition of cottaging and going out into the cottage and going to the lake and spending time in nature and spending time on the water. These are traditions that need to continue. Getting out in nature, going for hikes, whatever the case may be, but just getting out in the world is super important. And then you look at, because here's the thing, if you don't have traditions that you follow, and if you don't have traditions that matter to you, and then it really leads to, do you have roots? Or do you just do whatever traditions are popular in society right now? Because here's the thing, if you don't know if you don't have traditions, and if you don't know your roots, and if you don't know where you came from, because I do think knowing your roots is very important as well, then some other culture that knows where they come from, knows what they believe in, and they all collectively hold the same values together, if they come and they see you and your culture, and they see that you don't have a strong culture, that you don't have a strong system of belief, that you don't have a way of gathering together like we used to, then they think that they can just take you over because they're all united against you. So I think it's important to understand the value of having shared values. If you're a Canadian or if you're an American, it's important to understand that there are certain traditions that come with that. And a lot of people want to destroy the traditions. For example, in Canada, they want to destroy Canada Day. In Toronto, they used to set off fireworks every July 1st for Canada Day. And they stopped doing that. Why? And it's finding there's more and more. They're trying to find more and more ways to get rid of and cancel out traditions here. Another thing that I've noticed is in Toronto as well. We have a festival that happens every September, and it's called Polish Fest. A few years ago, some people tried to cancel Polish Fest because it was too exclusive. It wasn't inclusive enough. And then the Polish people came up and said, no, we've been doing this for 30 years or however long it's been going. We're going to continue to call it Polish Fest. And they had a fight so that this one person in their community that took offense to their tradition, they had a fight to keep it because somebody didn't think it was inclusive enough. And you start looking at how they use the idea of inclusivity to exclude your traditions, to exclude your values. And that's why I think tradition matters. And knowing what to care about and what not to care about matters. I think one thing people need to care about is their traditions, their family traditions, and their traditions in their countries, whether that be Thanksgiving. I know a lot of people try to cancel Thanksgiving, and it gets ridiculous. And it's like, it's an American tradition, it's a Canadian tradition. You know, having turkey at Thanksgiving, having turkey at Christmas. In Toronto, in the distillery district, we have something every year called the Christmas market. I think it was 2 years ago, they canceled that. Now it's called the winter market because, again, it wasn't inclusive enough. But it's just like, everybody went to the Christmas market. It wasn't exclusive at all. But it's a slow way to erase people's history. Tradition matters. Having family traditions matter. Knowing where you come from. For example, me, I have roots. Well, my roots are always in Saskatchewan because that's where I was born, and that's where when the day comes, I'll be buried in Saskatchewan. But also beyond that, though, my ancestors come from the United Kingdom. They come from Scotland, they come from Ireland, they come from England, they come from also Norway and from France. And so when I see what's happening in, England or in the United Kingdom or in France or in Europe, I care about that because I do have a connection to the European culture. I do have a connection to the United Kingdom. Those are my ancestors, so I definitely care about what happens in Europe. I live in Canada, so obviously I care about what happens in Canada. And also my neighbors are Americans. We live on North America. At the end of the day, we're on the continent of America. So I obviously care what happens in America and to my American brothers and sisters. And I believe and I love the American traditions as well. I love American Thanksgiving. 2 days off to watch football, cook turkey, hang out with your friends, crush some beers. I love it. It's amazing. And so we share a lot in common between Canadians and Americans. And people have forgotten that now because all anybody can ever think about is these tariff situation, which tariffs have been happening for centuries. Now all of a sudden, because people know how to divide people, now they know how to bring these problems to the forefront. But we got to remember, as Canadians and as Americans, we're brothers and we're sisters. And yeah, you might have fights here and there, but at the end of the day, the people of America and the people of Canada, We have a lot of similarities. We have a lot of similar roots, a lot of similar traditions. And I think that's important that we don't forget that. And we don't let these so-called leaders, or I should call them misleaders, tell us different. Because at the end of the day, every time I visit the United States, when I visit America, and it doesn't matter what city I visit, whether it's New York City, whether it's Miami, whether it's Pittsburgh, whether it's, where else? Montana, or I guess it would be South Dakota, North Dakota, these places. Yeah, I got that already. I've always had nothing but great experiences with people. Chicago, Dallas, you name it. I've always loved it. And I've always found that the American people that I've ever met, whether I be in a pub or I be eating out or I be anywhere, have always been gracious with me, have always been very respectful, and I've always loved hanging out and partying and chilling out with American people. It's great. And I found the same thing when I was in, obviously, I guess South America is a little different, but I did find a kinship there too. But I do think that the tradition of that these traditions, and making sure that we remember that, again, not everything's super serious, but some things do matter. I think it's important to understand that your culture matters, because if your culture is not strong, then a stronger culture will come in and try to take over your culture. A culture is what brings people together. A culture is what makes you stronger. And I've kind of noticed, if you look at, say, Western society over the course of the last 100 years, what's one thing that you think that we've lost as a culture that maybe other cultures have not lost? You would say that if I had to say there's one thing that was lost, I would say it would be that the Western society no longer really has any sort of true spirituality. It's been replaced by materialism. And when you don't have a place, because when you think about, even when I was growing up, I would go to church during Christmas with my grandparents. And my grandfather went to the United Church, my grandmother went to the Lutheran Church, but at the end of the day, we would go to different churches. And the church was really what brought the community together. And it kind of had shared values. But now my grandmother has a church, but I think there's 3 people or 4 people in her church now. But we've lost that aspect, that spiritual perspective. And now what happens when you have a nation of atheism, when you have a nation of people that don't believe in anything? Well, I'll tell you one thing, look at the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, the only thing they had was the state. And when you don't have shared values or shared spirituality in some way, shared morality, then the state becomes your God. And people start looking to the state and looking to experts and looking to institutions to replace what is lost. And that's another thing too. People diverting or giving their opinions to experts. I'm sick of these experts. If I'm watching anything on TV, or if I'm talking to somebody and they say, well, I'm an expert, I've got this degree and I've got that, I'm just walking the other way. Because that doesn't mean anything to me anymore. Because it seems to me that the experts know the least about what's actually going on. So this whole idea of experts and expert opinions, I'm done with expert opinions. So the minute I see an expert opinion or trust the science, or I see anything like that, you don't trust science, you test science. You prove science. You don't trust it. Right? Anytime I start seeing all the expert says, I just turn the other way. Because I've lost trust in that situation. But then you look at don't get me wrong, when I see experts in action, for example, they don't call themselves experts. Typically they are carpenters, they are electricians, plumbers, crafts, like these types of people, tradespeople who actually had to learn a trade where they were mentored. They had to get their journeyman, where they actually had to actually learn from somebody hands-on, watch somebody do it. Could be HVAC as well, but it's anything. If you truly want to become an expert at something, you got to watch somebody do it, and then they help teach you how to do it as well. They actually teach you what to do. They teach you how to fish. They teach you how to hunt. They teach you how to play guitar. Not everything, but they give you the basics. They teach you how to be an electrician. You don't just become an electrician without having somebody mentor you. Those are like, that's how people learn. And I do think that mentoring, to a degree, has been kind of lost on our generations. Is no longer a thing. But I love being mentored. When I don't know something, if I want to learn something, I want to know something, and then I meet somebody that knows what they're doing, for example, in YouTube, and I have somebody that's like, here's what you need to do better. Somebody that's done it before, somebody that has the experience, and somebody that starts giving me feedback on how I can get better, how I can improve things. I appreciate it, and it's a big help, you know? So mentorship is very important, you know? I just think that's something that we absolutely need to get back to. But also, right, it's like learning, like what year, what age does a man become a man these days? It seems like they call men kids up until they're 25. Oh, he's just a kid. A 25-year-old man is not a kid. You stop being a kid around what, 16? But there used to be a tradition. There used to be traditions where before you became a man, you would be taken out into the woods, and you would be left out. You would be left out there for, you know, a couple days to fend for yourself. And when you came back, you know, living, you were considered a man. You were treated like a man. And then they would come. Then the whole town, the whole village would come together, and they would have a huge party. And then the men would dance and celebrate the fact that they're men, right? It would be like anything. When you do something extraordinary, when you do a great deed, a celebration needs to occur. And the person that did the great deed, the person that became the man, deserves the respect of being a man. And now it's time for them to contribute to their community, contribute to their society, find a family, etc., etc. But that tradition of family, of being a man, seems to be kicked down the road. People don't become men nowadays till they're 30. A tradition. What do you think are some traditions that we think we should hold dear? I remember we used to, when I was in elementary school, every morning we would sing the Canadian national anthem. Every morning we would sing it. I think it was up till about grade 8. But every morning we would sing "O Canada." And we would sing it with the proper lyrics, not these new lyrics that have been changed in the last 10 years. Imagine that, just changing your national anthem lyrics because your prime minister thinks it's more inclusive. It's the right thing to do. It's ridiculous. Don't get me wrong, I believe in being open-minded, but not open-minded to the point where it destroys your own personal traditions, or it destroys who you are as an individual. As long as you're not hurting nobody, as long as you're not harming anybody, you're not stealing from anybody, as far as I'm concerned, do what you like. But don't come over here and force things on me if I don't want them, because I will not allow that to happen. But traditions, getting back to traditions, I think is very important. And I think making sure that one thing you always want to ask, so for example, your father or your mother, or whoever, your grandma, your grandfather, if they're still alive, ask them this question. What's one tradition that you want me to keep alive? So if you ask your grandmother or your grandfather, your father, your mother, what's one family tradition you want me to keep alive forever? Find out what that is and keep it alive. And honor your parents, honor your father, honor your grandfather. Even if you have problems with them, at the end of the day, you aren't where you are. You can't be here without your ancestors. You can't be up here without your father, without given the opportunity to be here. Look at this. But also, I think it's important as well to honor your word. If you're going to say something, do it. If you make an agreement with somebody, hold it. Your word is your bond. This used to be a thing. Having honor, taking care of each other, taking care of your friends. These things matter. But when you look, it seems when everything you see on television and everything you see on TV, it's all about betraying people. When you look at reality TV, it's all about plotting against each other. It's all about being conniving. And the people that are the most conniving, like Richard Hatch from Survivor 1, the people that are backstabbing the most, the people that are the worst, the most dishonest people, those are the ones that are celebrated. Why is it that we're celebrating the terrible people in the world? Careful who you celebrate. Careful who you look up to. Because looking up to people like that, people with dishonor, people that aren't honorable, that's a problem. Choose your heroes wisely and make sure they pass your test. What traditions do you think we should keep alive that are Western traditions? Whether you're in Canada or the United States, or if you're in the United Kingdom, Germany, Australia, Norway, France, whoever's watching, what are some traditions you think we should keep alive in Western society? That's one thing I noticed when I was in Mexico and I was in Colombia. They keep their traditions alive and well. When you go to Mexico and you're there for their Independence Day, I believe it's September 5th, the entire country parties. And I'm telling you, everything shuts down. Everybody goes to the town square and it's a party, everybody. And when the Day of the Dead, for example, in Mexico, is a huge, huge tradition there. And they celebrate their ancestors. They go to the graveyards and they honor their dead, the dead ancestors. They light candles for them. They put their favorite drinks out, their favorite food out. They honor their ancestors. This is important. When you go, and in Mexico as well, one thing I found very interesting is, and not only Mexico, but Mexico, Colombia, but they basically, the whole month of December is basically a holiday because they're celebrating. They're celebrating because Christmas is a big deal over there. And coming together as a family over there is a big deal. Family tradition in Colombia, in Mexico, from what I've seen, is still alive and well. And you know, that's just one thing I noticed by spending lots of time there. The importance of family, and I think family does matter. That's why I make an effort to get home at least once a year or twice a year, so I could spend time with my family in my roots in Saskatchewan. That's why I go fishing with my dad every year, my uncle and whoever else. But anyways, I just think that it's important for us to think a little bit about our roots, a little bit about our traditions, and about why tradition matters, and why we need to keep tradition alive to a degree. All right, I'm Matt Ross. I'm the Known Wolf.